Dolby Atmos is that new surround sound format that just came to commercial theaters a couple of years ago, but now it's available for home theaters. Whereas 5.1 and 7.1 sort of circle around you, Atmos is like a dome that just completely envelops you. It works great in the big theaters, but how's it going to work at home? Well, the at-home solution can be pulled off in one of two ways. You either put speakers in your ceiling, or you aim speakers up at the ceiling from below so the sound will bounce down towards you. When I first heard about this, I was skeptical about that latter approach, but Pioneer's chief speaker designer Andrew Jones told me bouncing off the ceiling is better.
So that's the key. It's not an add-on, it is integrated in. And I got involved in doing an enabled system because of what I heard when Dolby showed it to me. I preferred the sound of the enabled. And it's interesting since that time, as more and more film mixers have been exposed to the enabled type approach. They prefer the enabled sound. Because in the theatrical release and in a theatre, the speakers are way above you. In a home, they're not. If the physical speaker's in the ceiling, it's 7.5 to 8 foot typically. It's a bit too close. Yeah, and as you move around your listen locations, you're getting closer to one speaker than the other, the image is shifting, you're aware of a physical speaker coming from up there. With the bounced signal from the enabled, this appears upside down, 6 feet above the ceiling. So the source that you're aware of that's giving you the encoding information to give height is 6 foot above an 8 foot ceiling. And it doesn't change as you move around. So the sound field does, I think, become more immersive, more continuous. Maybe not quite as discrete, but the real fun aspect of Atmos is this immersion in the sound field.
Of course, it's important to remember that you really need a flat ceiling for this to work properly. If you've got vaulted ceilings, irregular angles, or an unfinished basement with exposed joists, this reflection method isn't going to work so well. So with this reflected approach in mind, Jones set about developing a set of high-performance Atmos-enabled speakers. And when he did, he spotted an opportunity to bring a different kind of driver to the mix.
When I got the specs of what the drive unit needs to do to meet the Atmos-enabled process to give this sound field, there's a directivity spec in there. And yes, it's met by a full-range driver, but it's perfectly met by a concentric driver. And when I looked at what Dolby had done, and potentially other people would be doing with an enabled system, Dolby don't control what they do for this forward-firing set of drivers. They only control what we do with the top driver. So no matter what exotic technology you might have there, you probably can't use it on top because it won't meet the Dolby requirements.
You see, these speakers don't have separate tweeters or mid-range drivers. The two are bundled into one unit, where the mid-range driver acts as a sort of waveguide for the tweeter. The advantage is that the source of the mid-range and the treble is in exactly the same place. And that kind of controlled directivity is exactly what you need for Atmos.
Now, the whole point of Atmos, as we know, is it's giving us height information. The ear can detect height. So it can detect that some of the sounds are coming from here and some of the sounds are coming from there. So you get a lack of believability to a small degree by splitting the drivers. Now you've got another problem. You've got a crossover trying to integrate those drivers together. And you have to pick a design axis or listening axis where both integrate together. But as soon as you stand up or sit down, you're no longer on that optimum axis. You're a different distance from the tweeter. If you stand up, you're closer to the tweeter than you are.
Right out of the sweet spot.
You've moved out of the sweet spot and you've got phase interference between them. So now the response starts to wiggle, whether up, down. Even worse for a center channel because you now put that on its side. So your listening locations vary tremendously and those wiggles come in. Then the third factor is directivity. All sound sources radiate equally around at low frequencies, but as you go up in frequency, they start to focus, just like a focusing flashlight. Wide beam converts to narrow beam. How do we fix this? It seemed ideal for Atmos, because it's not a full range driver, it is a true two-way with the inherent benefits that gives, but it means now I can employ exactly the same driver for the front as for the top. And think about it, a stereo system, you don't use one speaker for one channel, something totally different for the other.
Right, you want a voice match.
You want a voice match, everything must be identical between left and right. Now, as you expand to a full surround sound system, ideally you want to do the same thing. I know we've got into a habit of cheap, small surround speakers and then concentrate on the fronts as being the main ones. But in reality, that's a compromise. The real way to do surround sound is 5 or 7 identical speakers and not even a separate subwoofer. Ideally, everything should be full range. The more you split it up and change it, the less enveloping the sound field will be. So if we take that philosophy and extend it to Atmos, my thought was, if I have exactly the same driver facing up as facing front, then I extend that homogeneity of sound field into the overhead field as well as the field around us.
What's more, Andrew Jones pulled off this cool trick where the bass frequencies in the Atmos channel get routed to the bass drivers on the front of the speaker. And that's okay because bass is non-directional, and that lightens the load on the Atmos speaker for a cleaner sound. Put all these speakers together with Pioneer's flagship Elite receiver, calibrate the system, and wow, it really works. The dome of sound effect that I've always wanted to hear at home is closer than ever before and noticeably superior to conventional 5.1 surround. Right now, demo material is scarce, but even 5.1 movies or music sound better with Dolby surround processing. We're really impressed with what Jones has done here, and you can learn more in our full review.